Today is April 16th, 2008. This is the Burleson Public Library. This interview is being conducted for the Library of Congress Veterans History Project. In front of me here is Hal Cleveland. He was born on December 17th, 1952. He served in the U.S. Navy, and he is here for an interview. Mr. Cleveland, thank you for coming down. I'd like to start off by asking you, where were you born?
I was born in Fort Worth, Texas, Harris Hospital.
Harris Hospital. And what were your parents' names?
My daddy's name was Orville Willard, and he went by the name Pete Cleveland. And my mother was Billy Ruth, and she went by Ruth Cleveland.
What about any siblings?
I have an oldest brother. His name is Wayne Cleveland, and he goes by the nickname of Smokey. And then I have an older brother, Max Cleveland, and then myself.
Well, did you go to school here in Burleson?
I sure did. I went from 1959 to 1971, graduated here, Burleson High School.
What got you into the service?
Well, at the time I joined the service, it wasn't very popular to be in the service, but I graduated high school and decided I'd go a year at Tarrant County Junior College, and I got to looking at my options, and I wanted to do something with my life, so I decided I'd travel. And the Navy offered that opportunity, and I went down and talked to a recruiter, and he said a whole bunch of things to me, and I agreed with him, and off I went.
Well, what kind of training did you have?
Well, as far as the training goes, it's your standard boot camp. I actually joined the Naval Air Reserve. I'm a little bit unusual when it comes to where I went to boot camp and all, but I went to boot camp in Millington, Tennessee under the Naval Air Reserve training program. That went defunct just a little while after I went through it.
Well, do you remember much about your training?
Well, it was quick, a lot of running, a lot of sir, yes, sirs, and a lot of that normal brainwashing they run you through to get you militarized.
Well, after your basic training, where did you go?
Well, after I left there, I went to back to Naval Air Station at Dallas, and I was waiting on further orders. And when the orders came through, I went to the USS Kitty Hawk, CV-63 out of San Diego, California. I was assigned to ship's company in V-1 division, which I was ultimately groomed to be an aircraft firefighter rescuer. I ran around on the flight deck, putting out burning planes and burning pilots and shoving planes over the side.
Now, Kitty Hawk, that's a carrier, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Well, once you were on the Kitty, well, first of all, what was it like to see a carrier? Had you ever been on one before? Or?
Well, the first time I saw that rascal, I was, I'm reminiscing now. The first time I saw it, I was in awe. I'd never seen anything so big in all my life. I looked up at it, and the higher up I looked, the closer I got, it kept getting bigger and bigger, and it was a big ship.
Was there anyone you knew on the Kitty Hawk, or went through training with you that was assigned there?
It's funny that you asked that. I have several occurrences where I ran into people that I knew from different parts of the world. I was down in what we call our small store, because I was down there buying some uniform parts, and I had picked up a pair of socks. I was talking to myself, and there was a guy standing next to me, and I was stretching them out there, and I said, I wonder if these things fit over my feet. And the guy said, I don't know, and I turned around, and it was David Hunt, and I had gone to school with him here in Burleson. He was aboard the same ship with me.
Well, so you went to, was it San Diego out there for the Kitty Hawk?
Yeah, San Diego, and then we made tours to the Western Pacific, which at that time it was through Hawaii and the Philippines and South China Sea, which is off the coast of Vietnam.
And now you mentioned you wanted to travel. Was this the kind of travel that you wanted? Or?
Well, there's an old saying about join the Navy and see the world, but they didn't tell me I'd see it through a porthole.
Well, did the ship ever stop anywhere? Or?
That first cruise I went on, it would, let's see, I'm trying to think, it's been 30 years. Hawaii, Philippines, Singapore, and we got over into Mombasa, Kenya, over in East Africa. And I think we made it up into the Persian Gulf. That was back before all this mess over there started. That's when we can go up there without getting shot at. And that's pretty the extent of my Kitty Hawk tour there.
So, what were your duties consisting of mainly?
Well, we stood fire watches anytime we were in port. I was a trained firefighter. Like I said before, I put out aircraft fires. And
was that a common occurrence at all, or?
Well, it happened from time to time. Every sailor that goes aboard ship goes through firefighting school. Firefighting is a secondary to whatever they do. It primarily, if a ship caught fire and it's your sea, there's no fire department to call, so you've got to be your own fireman.
So, what would happen when a plane came down and crash landed on deck and caught fire?
Well, it depends on the circumstances. Typically, when we're in the flight quarters, that's what they call that, we would be positioned on the ship. And at the time, we were using MB-5 fire truck, which is a big four-wheel truck with a 600-gallon per minute turret water cannon on top of it. And then we had what we call twin agent units, which was little tow tractors with 200-gallon light water tanks on the back of it. Most of the time I was on the back of one of those turrets sitting on looked like a tractor seat where they welded it to the back of it, and then I had a driver. There was one incident where we had an A7 come in, A7 Corsair. It took an in-flight engagement, which means that it got a wave off and the tail hook grabbed the arresting gear wire, and it flopped, it come back down to the deck. Didn't catch fire, but it shook the pilot up pretty bad. And we approached it, and at that time I got up on the front windscreen of it, and I was going to help the pilot out of it. He was still shook up, and then he decided he didn't need any help to get out, so I went ahead and let him get down that way. He didn't want me dropping him, what he did.
So, what was the mood of those aboard ship?
The what?
What was the mood of those aboard the ship?
Well, at that time we were going through a lot of racial tensions in the military. I was on the Kitty Hawk when they had the racial tensions of 1972, and with that, after it occurred, we pulled back in, and the Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Zumwalt, initiated a race relation course so that basically we learn about each other's cultures. And that was a major turnaround in my lifetime too, when I stop and think of it, because it taught me a lot of things that I didn't know about other people. Now, we're not talking just about black, we're talking about Filipinos. I mean, anybody in different races that we had in the military at that time. Growing up in my hometown of Burleson, Texas, it was pretty minimal to what exposure I had with the outside world, and here I was out in the big middle of it. And out of everything that Admiral Zumwalt did, I do appreciate that, because as I went through life, I still to this day use the lessons learned from those classes.
What were some of these lessons?
Well,
just take for instance Filipinos.
Well, you just.
What did you learn about their culture that helped you out?
Well, I learned that there's no place like home, really. The thing that I remember most about the class was that they would write down some words on the blackboard, and one of them would say deuce and a quarter, one of them would say hog, and we would wonder what they were, and deuce and a quarter ended up being, to me, what probably a large truck, a ton and a quarter, ton and a half truck or something like that. Well, a deuce and a quarter to some of the other students in there was a Buick Electra 225, which is a model car back then. Well, here we were saying hog, and I thought that was a farm animal, and then somebody said that was a motorcycle, and it's just a play on words that everybody uses differently as we go through life.
So, now you went to Africa. What was it? Did you go on land and encounter any cultures?
In Africa, we got liberty in Africa, and we farmed around there and tried to mix with the culture. There wasn't too much going on there. I didn't really like it because it's down below the equator, and anytime you went to walk anywhere, it was like really hot, and I wasn't used to the heat.
Not even from Texas?
It wasn't anything like Texas.
Well, what kind of interaction did you have with the local people, either in Africa or anywhere else?
Well, typically we had a lot of people that would meet the ship that had friends there from previous deployment to that port, and occasionally I would go back and make friends on one cruise, then come back and go back and look other people up. Australia was a nice place, and over in England, typically the more communication I had with people that could speak English, because I wasn't really good at Tagalog and the different languages of the different countries.
Now you mentioned this was kind of a difficult time for the armed forces at that point. What was the reaction of people that you came into contact with the U.S. Navy or the United States in general?
Vietnam. It left a bad taste in everybody's mouth, and at that time, it wasn't popular to even wear a uniform anywhere. So we were directed not to wear our uniforms on liberty. Now I can remember after boot camp, I came home. I was proud to be a sailor. I had my uniform on, and I went on liberty, and I said I want to go out and visit all my friends. And that same night, I learned not to wear my uniform because somebody decided he would want to pick a fight, and he wouldn't have picked a fight had I not been on wearing a uniform. But in the long run, that was the attitude of the country. Everybody was blaming the Vietnam War on the soldiers and sailors and airmen that were involved, and they were placing the blame at the wrong place. All we were doing following orders. Now that all changed back in 1980 when President Reagan took over. He brought an air of prestige back to the military. He changed the attitude of the country, and from that time on, it was.
Well, before we talk about President Reagan, let's go through the rest of the 70s.
Okay.
For the rest of the decade, where were you? What were you doing?
Well, I left the Kitty Hawk in 1974, came back to Texas, and I had what we call a break in service, and then I volunteer recall back to active duty in 1976. 1976, I went to a patrol squadron, which is it was considered sea duty, but it's a 4-engine turboprop P-3 Orion that would hunt submarines out over the water. I'm stationed at Moffett Field, California, and the difference between that and what I had been in before with ship's company on aircraft carrier was day and night. We slept in barracks. We got to go eat at the chow hall. I mean, the difference was day and night. I mean, I said, if this is the Navy, I think I'll stay in, and I stayed in.
Well, so basically you were assigned for that for till when?
I was in there until 1976. I spent time there traveling to Adak, Alaska, and to Kadena, Okinawa, and Misawa, Japan.
What were the concerns of the Cold War for you, being in the service? Or did it really figure in anywhere?
At the time when you figured the Cold War, we didn't look at it as a Cold War. We were just at, it didn't get called Cold War until after it was all over with. We spent most of our time chasing the Russians, and the Russians chased us, and through bear flyovers and our submarines hunting theirs. That's what we did in P3, was to hunt their submarines.
Did you ever come into contact with any?
Of course.
What would happen when you found a Russian submarine?
We'd track him until we lost him.
So after that duty, where did you go next?
I went to shore duty at the Chief of Naval Air Training in Corpus Christi, Texas. I'd asked for shore duty in Texas, and I went to staff duty at the Chief of Naval Air Training Command. There I was on staff duty at N5 Division, where I was, at that time I had lost hearing working on the flight deck. Before then I'd lost hearing working on the flight deck, and I'd gone to work as a maintenance administrationman, aviation maintenance administrationman. And that was when I made first class petty officer. And I had been on staff duty, and I assisted all the different training air wings with their maintenance administration aspect of my rate.
So in Corpus Christi, did you come back to visit Burleson at all, or?
Oh yeah, I'd zip up here back and forth on the weekends, and then I'd run back down there until I found me somebody I couldn't live without, and then the days started. Then the trip back and forth was a little bit fewer in between.
Well, describe that for me. Who did you find?
Well, kind of hard to talk about this now. It was my first wife.
Okay.
We got married in 1979, and we spent the better part of our 12 years together while I was in the Navy, and our choice of career kind of put that on the burner there.
Well, let's get into the 80s now. And you described President Reagan, how he kind of transformed the attitudes of the nation. What was that like for you in the service?
Well, I had left Corpus Christi and went to Oceana, Virginia, to on the attack squadron, VA 176 there, and there we were going through a lot of things that were happening, such as the Walker incident, which was a chief warrant officer selling Navy secrets to the enemy, and there was an overall emphasis on pride and professionalism in what we were doing. At that time, we was able to go out and wear uniforms again, and people, would look up to you wearing a uniform. Before that, it wasn't a good thing to do. We got about a 17% pay raise in 1 year to catch us up with what the civilian population was making, and that was one of the many things that happened to us.
So in Virginia, what were your duties?
I was in an attached squadron. I maintained their aircraft logs and records, and I was also I got passed around quite a bit. I did aircraft logs and records and data analysis for the squadron that I was in.
And what's data analysis?
Data analysis is a fancy word for a paper grader. Maintenance action form, visual information display systems and stuff like this that we used in the military to track maintenance. We used a lot of codes on them and put them in layman's terms. I graded the code that they would put on there before we put them into a computer so that they could schedule. We used that to schedule maintenance. We used that to monitor maintenance trends. If this particular component kept breaking on us, we would know how many times it broke.
You'd mentioned Lebanon. What happened there?
Well,
Did you
actually,
go over to Lebanon and on a ship, or?
actually, we were in Grenada first, and this is in 1983. We were on a deployment to the Mediterranean on the USS Independence. And a lot of times when you're crossing the sea, crossing the ocean, we have what we call plat lenses. These are TV screens that shows a picture of the flight deck, and it shows you our wind speed, whether the wind's going over our deck, how many knots we were traveling, and give a longitude, latitude. At any one time, you could look up there and tell where you were at. If you had a map, you could find out where you were at. Well, all of a sudden, that went away one day, and we didn't know where we were going. Well, for most of us, we were wondering what was going on, because we should be headed east by now, but we kept going south. And I can remember the sun setting on the starboard side of the ship and coming up on the port side of the ship, and that means we were headed south. And we kept going south and south, and then our captain came on board on the 1MC and indicated that we were going to a tiny spice island called Grenada, that we were going to go down there to assist the other armed forces, the Army and Marine Corps down there with some operations down there.
Had you ever heard of Grenada before?
Never have.
What did that mean to you to go to Grenada?
Well, I just knew that we were going to go down and provide some air support for some Marines and Rangers down there that had gone down there to rescue those students.
And what were your duties during that conflict?
Well, typically, my duties during any conflict would always be the same. My job was the same during war and in peace, because when we go to sea, we train to go to war, and every day we're at war. So there's really nothing that's changed. The only difference is that we had lost our data analyst, which is the guy that was assigned to the position, and I was filling two positions at the same time. I was doing our aircraft logs and records and maintaining the data analyst function of the squadron.
So following Grenada, what then?
Well, just as soon as we mopped up in Grenada, I mean, they were still mopping up in Grenada, and then we got word that I can't remember, it's 143 or 243 Marines had got killed at the barracks in Lebanon. And at that time, aboard the Independence, I think they were saying that we made the fastest transatlantic crossing of a carrier, a conventional carrier, to get off the coast of Lebanon.
And so tell me about the Lebanon conflict a little bit.
Well, once we got there, most of everything was already over with. The Hamas, or whoever it was, blew up the Marine barracks and killed all our Marines. And we would fly up and down we would go up and down the coast with the ship. And eventually, we were doing a lot of mapping and locations of the SAM site, the surface-to-air missile sites in the mountains that surrounded Lebanon.
Well, take me through the rest of the 1980s. Where did you go? What did you do? Kind of continuing from earlier.
Well, after I got through there, I had orders to the Forrestal. I wasn't on the Forrestal very long, because I just made the workups with it, and then my sea tour was up, which was a 3-year tour. I took orders to Naval Air Station Kingsville, Texas, which I was at Commander Training Air Wing 2. I worked staff duty there as well. They converted my position to a contracting officer technical representative, and that's where the Navy had started delegating maintenance work to civilian contractors. And in order for the civilian contractors to work with our aircraft, we had to monitor their functions. In other words, we would monitor the contract. I would go in and inspect. I was an inspector's inspector.
I was about to say. Well, now, what brought you out of the service?
Well, I actually when I got to the point that I retired, I eventually made it to the point in my life that there's no saying about if you spend any time past 20 years, you're working for half pay. That's what it boiled down to. It's like I figured, well, I'll get out and get me another job, and then I'll get my retirement. That's what got me out.
So what was your rank when you left?
I was first class petty officer.
Where did you go?
Where did I go?
Where did you go after you left?
I came back to Burleson, Texas. I was here for a little while. I worked in the prison system. While I was in Kingsville, Texas, I had volunteered as a sheriff deputy there, and I decided I'd pursue a law enforcement career. Well, after getting back up here and being gone that many years, nobody at the sheriff's office knew who I was. They'd never heard of me, so it was kind of hard to get into that little clique there. So I kind of put that on the back burner and went to school.
Well, you're a pretty young guy. So I mean, what are you doing today?
I am a safety engineer for a company up in Fort Worth, our wireline service organization that was bought up by one of the third largest oil exploration company, and I'm the safety engineer for their manufacturing plant.
Now I can tell by your hat that you are a member of a veterans organization.
Most definitely. I've got my fingers in a lot of pies.
Well, tell me what you're a member of.
Being retired, I'm a life member of the Fleet Reserve Association. I'm a life member of the National Association of Uniformed Services, and I'm also a life member of the Retired Enlisted Association. And I was the first president of the Johnson County Veterans Council that we started in 1993. We since then trying to think here. We merged with the National Association of Uniformed Services. The National Association of Uniformed Services takes all members, officer, enlisted, dependents. It pretty well catch all, and it makes it easy for anybody to qualify for. You don't have to be in a particular war or time frame, such as the VFW and American Legion, and you don't have to be retired to be a member.
And what does your work consist of with them?
Currently, I'm their vice president, and I work toward legislative affairs within the county, actually Texas Congressional District 17. We monitor the congressional bill before Congress that deals with veterans, and we are actually veterans advocates, which we assist veterans getting their benefits and stuff, and making it educational. Because once most veterans leave the service, they want to put it behind them, and then after a while they decide, well, there's some benefits out there that I'm entitled to, and they don't know where to start, and we help them with that.
Well, it's obvious that being still a part of the mix, that your service did have an impact on you. What was that impact?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand that.
What was the impact of your service on your life? And your kind of in your way of thinking, or the way that you live your life?
One of the things that just really profoundly jumped off the plate at me is when I retired from the military and came home. The first thing I missed was the camaraderie. The camaraderie, meeting somebody, knowing that the person's going to cover your back, no matter what situation you're going to get into. I have a hard time dealing with that to this day, even when I work, especially with what I do. My job is to help people from getting into situations where they get hurt, and I want them to not only, when I look out after them, I want them to look out after others. Well, today's society, people aren't that way.
So, do you keep in contact with a lot of the people that you met in the service?
I have, but maybe one or two that I've kept in contact with over the years. I am planning to go to a squadron reunion this year. It's probably about September, October time frame up in Norfolk, Virginia, and this will be my first reunion to go to. I have been in email contact with some people that was in that squadron the same time I was, and I look forward to that.
Well, I tell you, I thank you very much for coming. Is there anything else that you'd like to say, or other stories you can think of before we go?
Well, not at this time. I mean, I've talked a lot about it, a lot of little things. I just know that a lot of stuff that's going on nowadays, and these kids coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, and I just want them to know that they're not alone, because you've got some guys that wore them boots before them, and they don't have to think that they're in this world alone, because there's a lot of veterans out there that are willing to put out their hand. All you got to do is ask.
Well, I tell you, thank you very much for